Hi everyone, so today I'm going to show you how to stitch around the edge of your rainbow or your other individual piece. If this is a different kit that you've got, I'm going to demonstrate on the rainbow here today. So you should have cut out your punch needle piece like this, cut out your backing felt, make sure the hoop is on the back there, and that you've put glue around the edge. Now, in the instructions, I would have said to you, be careful when gluing the edge. If the glue was to reach all the way down to here, where your needle is going to go through, then the needle won't go through because the glue is really hard. So it's really important when you're gluing the edge that you just put it literally right on the edge of the fabric, and that's just to stop it fraying, because the stitching takes quite a long time and you might be putting this down and picking it up over a couple of days or even weeks. That's why you just want to stop the fabric fraying, because if it starts to fray, then obviously all of your punch needle work is going to come undone. So you put on your crocodile clips, if that's what they're called, and you just need to make sure that the punch needle piece and the backing felt line up as closely as possible. So if you start to stitch and they're not lined up properly, then your design is going to start to sort of go sort of skew-if, and then you won't have the same length of stitching, the same width of stitching all the way around. So on this piece, I'm going to start in the middle just to make sure there's enough space for me to fit a nice stitch in here. So that's why you've drawn your line on the back, because it helps keep the stitching really, really neat and even. So you're going to get a piece of thread. No need to knot it in the back. Piece of the same wool that you've been using, and you're going to use the colour that corresponds to the part that you're stitching next to. So this bit's going to be white, and then you'll move to green, yellow, pink, whatever your colours are. So you're going to stitch in from the back, and because of the way you've done everything else, it should line up pretty perfectly with the edge of your punch needle. So all you're going to do is pull that through, leave a little tail on the back there, wrap that through, and then you're just going to go back in right next door to the tail, sticking to the line. And what I'm going to do is keep the tail underneath so that it's really, really neat. So I'm going to stitch next to it this side, keeping the tail this way, so that this tail is going to get covered with stitches so it doesn't come undone. So go in through the line you've drawn, through to the front. If it's not come out in exactly the right place, then just move it slightly. You might need to angle it slightly more. Pull it through and pull it quite tight. And then, I'm afraid it's just a very slow, painstaking process of stitching all the way around. You can see I'm covering the tail there. Back in on your line, check on the other side where it's coming out. So the needle has come out there, kind of in the middle of the punch needle bit, not where I want it. So I'm just going to angle it a bit differently so that it comes out right next to your last stitch. Pull this bit round if that's easier, so I find easiest. Now you don't want your piece of wool too long, because otherwise it does get quite tangled. So what you have to do, I'll show you when I finish this piece. You'll just start a new piece of wool and cover the tail in exactly the same way. So I'm going to carry on stitching round, and then I'll show you what happens when you run out of wool. So I've carried on stitching around. Obviously when you get to one of the clips and you need to move the clip out of the way, just obviously undo it and move it round to another part where you might need another clip. Then I'm just going to show you what to do when you're running out of your piece of wool. So you're going to put it round quite tightly around the back of your piece, and then with your needle just thread up, if you can see that, thread up through some of the stitches you've already done. And put it through. And then you can just cut it off there, where you've come out of the stitches. Push it in with the needle a little bit if you want to, so it's even neater. And then you just carry on the same as you did before. Cut a new piece of wool and cover the tail as you did before. I'm just going to switch colour and I'll show you at the top, and I'll try and get a bit closer to the camera. So I've threaded some of my pink colour onto my needle, and I'm just going to show you at the top of the rainbow and just try and get a bit closer than I did last time. So I'm going to start at the top and push through where you've drawn your line. If you see, it's come out slightly further away than I want it, so I'm just going to angle back in and get it as close to the outline of punch needle as I can. Pull it through. And then I'm going to hold the tail down, pull this bit over the top, and then stitch right next to it. Out the other side. Keeping as close to that first stitch as you can. Put it through. And I find it easier to pull it over the top and kind of hold it with the other hand, so you're kind of holding it in place. Before you make your next stitch. See, so it's going to catch the tail and catch it underneath all the stitches to keep it in place. Pull it over the top again, quite tightly, and then again just carry on all the way round. As I say, it's quite time consuming. It's going to take you quite a few hours to do this, and I'll carry on stitching around and I'll show you how to do the corners. So I've carried on stitching all the way around the edge, and I've just come to a corner. Now all of your corners should be nicely rounded. If they aren't, then just grab some scissors and just cut so that they're nicely rounded, just so they're a bit easier to stitch around. And then all you're going to do is exactly the same thing. The only difference is you might need to come slightly further away from the line, just if you're getting a bit close to the corner, so you might just need to deviate from the line slightly. Get my needle through. it should still be exactly the same process, but if you see my line, if you can see that well, my line is kind of there, and I'm just going to stitch slightly further away. Obviously if the stitch is too short in width, then it's not going to maybe not hold as well, not look as nice. So just move a bit further away if you need to. And then as you get to the kind of cornered bit, you just might not pull the wool quite as tightly. Just keep it loose if you need to, move it with the needle if you need to, just to make sure it's still covering that corner really neatly. So I've just pulled that one quite gently, not too tight, and carry on round. If you need to cross over the stitches slightly to make sure there's no white showing, then you can do that. So again, just move it around if you need to slightly, and just carry on round any corners. So it's exactly the same process, you just might need to take a little bit more time and just be a little bit more careful to make sure that all your white fabric is covered. So when you get to the point where you need to change colour, so you obviously need to change colour with your pattern. So I've finished the pink here, and I'm just going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to push the needle through some of the stitches that I've already done, pull that through, and cut it off like that. And you can see that's in line with the rainbow. And I'm just going to switch to my next colour. And then just carry on in exactly the same way. So starting from the back, push through right next to your original colour. Oh, pulled it all the way through. So leave the tail as normal. Pull this piece around so that it's right next to your first colour. And then just carry on exactly as you were, going right next to the stitch you've just done. And put it through quite tightly, catching the tail, and then carry on and just change colour whenever you need to. Obviously here I'm going to go finish the yellow, swap to green, swap to white, all the way around until you've finished all your stitching. So I've done all my stitching all the way around and it's nearly finished. I'm just going to show you on the corner here, on this one, if you can see it. If you can hear, my kids are home now, so if you can hear noise in the background, that's them, sorry about that. So there's just little gaps here. So if that happens, which is what can happen on the corners, just going to go back in. So I'm just going to actually start by threading the tail through so the tail is already hidden. And I'm just going to come out in the gap that's there. And then I'm just going to do exactly the same thing. I'm just going to go over those bits where there's any gaps. Might be slightly harder to pull through because you already stitched in those areas. Just needs one more, I think. and then just guide the wool in place wherever there's a gap. So there you go, if there's any gaps all the way around, just do that. And then again, just hide the thread, hide the wool by, let's get mine out of the way. Threading it through like that. Okay, you take that one.
I take that one.
You take that one, yeah.
Yeah.
And there you go, that's all finished. All the stitching all the way around. As I say, if there's any other gaps, just go through and fill them back in. Obviously, if there's a few gaps on the back that doesn't really show, then it doesn't matter. It's only really if they show from the front.
I put you, Mummy.
And again, if you need to stitch away from the line that we drew, it doesn't matter too much if you're coming away from it. If you need to,
What are you doing, Mummy?
I'm trying to film.
Oh yeah.
It's really just a guideline to keep the back as neat as possible. So there you go, you're all done.
All done.
All done.